Which Chicago Bears receiver should you buy in your dynasty leagues now that Ben Johnson is with the Bears? We'll tell you on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we are recapping the NFC North, looking ahead to the 2025 offseason. And Kate, let's start with some players that we want to buy from this division over the next several months. I want to start with DJ Moore because I think there's been a lot of debate in the dynasty community between Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. Which of these receivers is going to break out under Ben Johnson? Why do you think it's going to be DJ Moore?
I just think DJ Moore offers a little bit more versatility over the middle of the field. Now, in 2024, there wasn't a straight up slot receiver. I think we know that the slot receiver is going to be a big part of Ben Johnson's offense moving forward. Mm-hmm. I think Cole Kmet's going to benefit from some of that usage outside of the slot or out of the slot and, as an inline tight end. But I do think that DJ Moore is the guy that most naturally fits that inside over the middle of the field role. Rome Odunze, more of that traditional X boundary receiver who is going to make these big plays down the field, going to be more of the, physical boundary guy. Mm-hmm. DJ Moore, I think, offers more of that finesse over the middle of the field. And I think it's a great fit for what he does so well. And what I think people kind of forget, DJ Moore, 27 years old, he's coming off a season with, generally a lot of disappointments, but he had all the opportunity in the world in year one with Caleb Williams. What we really have to work on is refining the efficiency. And I think Ben Johnson's going to help with that a lot.
Yeah, I would caution people to think that there's going to be, or this offense is going to look exactly like what we saw in Detroit, because I think Ben Johnson is smart enough, Kate, to build an offense around the players that he currently has, not the players that he had with the Lions a year ago. So maybe it is more vertical shots down the field to Rome because of Caleb Williams, who's just a better deep ball passer than what Jared Goff is. But the reason I'm buying DJ Moore, I just think he's a hashtag good football player, Kate. And we've seen him be successful with a bunch of different quarterbacks in a bunch of different offenses. And I got to believe that Ben Johnson is going to want to try to find ways to get him the football, whether that's from the slot, whether that's as the X receiver on slants, crossing routes, whatever. I just think DJ Moore's price right now in Dynasty is low enough that I want to go out and grab him. I want him as my wide receiver 3 in my leagues. I truly think DJ Moore could be in for a career year this upcoming season with Caleb Williams, with Ben Johnson.
Yeah, he has the quarterback who's able to make these improvisational plays out of absolutely nowhere, can extend plays beyond far what we know any quarterback should typically do. Obviously, we want to clean up the sacks, but when you have a quarterback that's able to improvise like that, we know that the upside's pretty significant. And in his first year with Caleb Williams as a rookie who, let's be honest, there was a lot of ups and downs with Caleb Williams, but generally speaking, didn't turn over the ball. He was pretty good in that regard. Mm-hmm. Didn't, necessarily have a ton to offer in terms of not being able to take sacks. But DJ Moore, I think, is going to be paired with a quarterback that wants to get him the football. Caleb Williams is a good quarterback. And again, looking at that opportunity, 26.6% target share in 2024. That ranked 13th among wide receivers. He ran the 5th most routes among wide receivers, ranked 3rd in yards after the catch, 10th in red zone targets. The opportunity was 100% there for DJ Moore to have a wide receiver 1 season. It's just the refinement of, figuring out how to make this offense a little bit more efficient and optimize Caleb Williams from an accuracy standpoint and a not taking sack standpoint.
Let me ask you this. Let's say you are in the back half of your league, right? Like you're drafting somewhere between 7 to 12.
Okay.
And you need a wide receiver. Would you be comfortable flipping your first round pick for DJ Moore? Or do you think that's an overpay?
I think that's a perfectly fine need, especially if you're in need of a wide receiver, because we know that this isn't going to be a wide receiver class that's super heavy up front. There's a couple of guys that will be in the first round, but like generally speaking, if you need a wide receiver in the rookie class, you're going to probably want to look elsewhere. This is going to be a class that probably prioritizes running back quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know necessarily that you're going to love all your options in the back half of the second half of your draft. And again, DJ Moore, 27 years old. We know like wide receivers at the age of 27, 28, 29, like that's their prime. And I do think that the stars are finally aligning for like a Terry McLaurin type season for DJ Moore. He checks all those boxes.
Who are you buying from this NFC North? Because DJ Moore was kind of my guy. Who do you have?
I want to buy TJ Hockenson, who is right now tight end 4 in Dynasty Startup Leagues, but at 27 years old, Minnesota Vikings under Kevin O'Connell. I think they're kind of quarterback proof at this point. And I think we're underrating the potential value here of TJ Hockenson, who has provided year over year tight end 1 value, high end tight end 1 value at that. And he seems a little bit forgotten because he was coming off of this torn ACL this year, came back mid-season. And I think we all, nobody really expected him to be 100%. And, he did, didn't score touchdowns. Like it was just kind of a second half of the season to forget. But I do think it was an important one, and just getting him back, getting reps under his belt for what is going to be, I think, a intriguing 2025 campaign. We don't know the quarterback situation here, but I keep looking at the gap between a Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, who I know are all younger, but there's no reason, I think, for TJ Hockenson to be valued around 3 rounds later than all of these other tight ends. Like TJ Hockenson, top 5 upside every single season that he's healthy, and he's only 27 years old, and I think we're about to see him hit his prime.
There are only a couple tight ends that really matter when it comes to our dynasty leagues, and he's one of them. He's also the cheapest of the ones that matter, right? So I think I don't disagree. He's still in the same offense. It's just going to be a different quarterback. Kevin O'Connell is going to want to make sure that he gets his touches. He's always been the preferred red zone target for whoever has been at quarterback. And I think this is a good time to buy because you're going into the offseason with him completely healthy. Excuse me. Tight end 4, 64th overall. I think that's a good value, Kate.
A really good value for a position that I think we know is super, super hard to find value at. And if there are only 4 tight ends that matter for dynasty, and TJ Hockenson is one of those guys, I want him on my team. I think there's a non-zero chance that he is a top 3 tight end for the next 4 seasons to come, barring any health issues. We know it's a good offense. We know he's already been a featured component of this offense when healthy. And I think like this year, this was his floor, and he was returning from a season-ending knee injury. Like,
can I read you some of the names of the players that are being drafted right now ahead of TJ Hockenson? And this is why, if you want to wait at tight end, I'm okay. These are guys that are being drafted ahead of him in Dynasty League football startup drafts. Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams, who's 32, Josh Downs, who might be wide receiver 3 or 4 on his own team, Tyrone Tracy, Keon Coleman, Michael Pittman, Isaiah Pacheco, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk, Jaden Reed. Like, I just take TJ Hockenson over all of those guys.
Give me TJ Hockenson over every single one of them without thinking. Blindfold me. I don't care. There is no tight end, I think, that poses as much value right now with as much upside, with as safe a floor. TJ Hockenson is the perfect dynasty buy.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about who we're selling from the NFC North this offseason. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. We absolutely love PrizePicks. Unfortunately, football is over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum to score more than 29 points. He's been red hot over the last couple of weeks. And the best part, PrizePicks is quick and easy, and you can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds. And their fast and secure withdrawals means that I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are recapping and reviewing the 2024 season from the NFC North, looking ahead to the 2025 offseason. Kate, which players are you selling from this division?
Got to talk about our running backs, because that's kind of the theme of sells here throughout our divisional review series. We're selling the running backs, and the biggest name value that I think you're going to get right now, Josh Jacobs, running back for the Green Bay Packers, who I'm not going to argue. He had a pretty baller season, Marcus. He had a great season. And I'm not here to take anything away from him, but I still think that coming after this campaign where, he looked like the Josh Jacobs of old, he had a healthy workload with the Green Bay Packers. He, finally got that very, very, very elusive receiving touchdown that he's been chasing his entire career. Finished the year on a massive rushing touchdown streak, like a set career high in terms of his rushing touchdown production. Like, that can't be forgotten. But we're also looking at an aging running back who, by the way, turned 27 years old today. Happy birthday, Josh. 27 years old. It's a young number, especially considering like we're seeing a lot of kind of resurgence here in terms of, older running backs. But this is a running back that ranks 4th among active running backs in total rush attempts. He is getting up there in the touch totals. We know Matt LaFleur likes to shake it up a little bit at the running back position. Like, he's not going to be a coach that's going to give his running back, when he has options, 80+% of those RB touches. It's time to sell.
We're getting close to 2,000 touches in the NFL, which is typically the number where you start to see the decrease in production. Now, the one thing I will say about Josh Jacobs is he didn't get a ton of work at Alabama. Despite being a first-round pick, he split touches with Najee Harris and a couple of the other running backs there. So that does help a little bit. I think it could preserve his body some, but this is somebody who has been the workhorse running back for 5-6 years now in the NFL. He also has a history of lower body injuries. I still like Josh Jacobs a lot. I think he can be a very valuable piece in 2025. But you start to look at where he's being drafted and valued in your dynasty leagues. And I do wonder if now is the time to cash in, especially before we get to the draft, because one of the things we've been saying all offseason long is this is an incredibly rich draft when it comes to running back talent. I don't think the Packers are going to draft the running back because they drafted Marshawn Lloyd last year. But I think once you see these running backs come into your dynasty leagues, it's going to push down the value of Josh Jacobs. So if you are going to sell him, I think now is the right time to do so.
Yeah. And I mean, let's look at the efficiency metrics that he posted this past season. He had an incredible campaign. Again, not here to take anything away from that, but like, this is the reason why I think you can really bolster the case for his value on the trade market here. 2024 percentiles per PFF, 76 percentile rushing grade among running backs, 76 percentile missed force tackles per attempt, 86 percentile yards after contact per attempt, 96 percentile PFF receiving grade. Like, he had, like, statistically a perfect campaign at the running back position. He had the touchdown production. He had the perfect season for you to make the case that he is not washed. And Marcus, let's talk about the contract situation, because Josh Jacobs, entered this year on a 3-year deal. He got paid, but the way that this contract was structured was effectively a 1-year deal because the Packers can cut bait really at any moment. I don't think they have any incentive to right
They
now.
won't do it this year, but you do wonder, like, after this year,
Yeah.
going into his age 28 year,
Yeah, and I
that's where
think
it's
like
possible.
he's not got that same financial security as a different structured contract because the numbers looked great at first glance, but when you looked at the ways that the contract was structured, there's some inherent risk there. So I think like all signs point to, yeah, Josh Jacobs probably going to post, I think, RB2 numbers here in 2025. But I do think there's another sleeper coming up. I do think there's room for regression. And Josh Jacobs, one of these guys that because of, the history of injury, because of the fact that like, all right, we saw him have a 393 touch campaign in 2022 and, took a step back in 2023. You have to wonder what that kind of touch total does for a running back, especially at the age of 27 now. 337 touches here in 2024. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more involvement from other pieces within the backfield here in 2025.
And just to be clear, I think Josh Jacobs could still post high-end RB1 numbers this year. But it's just that every running back is year to year, and that we view all these running backs, for the most part, as sells. And if you can cash in a 27-year-old running back for a wide receiver too, and that's what's happening right now in our dynasty leagues, you can trade him for the likes of Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, if you want to do that. I think this is a good time to cash in. I would rather be a year early than a year late when it comes to running backs, because we know what happens with these running backs, Kate. Like once they hit that wall, or once they start to drop in value, they go way down. I even look at his former teammate in Najee Harris. Najee Harris was being drafted, around RB 12, RB 13 at this time last year. He had another 1,000-yard season, but because it wasn't amazing, he's all the way down to RB 20 as he's getting ready to hit free agency. Rachaad White's another one. Rachaad White being drafted as a top 12 running back at this time last year, now down to RB 21. I'd rather get out early before it's too late.
For sure, especially if you can cash in and get, maybe a wide receiver at that value, because wide receivers just historically do lose value at a much slower rate than we see these running backs lose value.
Well, let me give you some names, Kate, like that are being drafted within the same round as Josh Jacobs. So you tell me who you would rather have, DK Metcalf or Josh Jacobs?
Metcalf.
DJ Moore or Josh Jacobs?
Moore.
Jameson Williams or Josh Jacobs?
Ooh, I'll probably take Jacobs.
I'd take Jacobs there as well. A couple more. Xavier Worthy. Jalen Waddle. I'd rather have Jacobs there.
I think I'd take Jacobs there as well.
Terry McLaurin. Brandon Ayuk. I'll take Jacobs there.
I'd probably take Jacobs there, but that one might just be dependent on what your greater need is and where you're at in terms of being a contender versus not.
The point is, if you shop Jacobs in your league, you're going to have options. People are going to want running backs. They're going to want to add depth. Maybe they're going to want to pair a Bijan with a Josh Jacobs and really go for it in 2025. Myself, if I have him, I'm looking to cash out for a receiver now and then hopefully draft running backs in my rookie draft, just because I think that's where the talent lines up. Not the case for wide receivers. Trade for those receivers now before we get to the draft.
For sure.
All right, let's talk about some sleepers from the NFC North going into this offseason. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Like I got to watch my Lakers last night, was live betting as that game was going on, really enjoying the Luka Doncic experience. Plus the app is so easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcast. All right, Kate, let's talk some sleepers from the NFC North going into the 2025 offseason. Who do you got?
All right, we just talked about Josh Jacobs and why he is a perfect sell. So naturally, that is a perfect segue to talk about running back Marshawn Lloyd as a potential sleeper here for the Green Bay Packers. 3rd round pick last year, had what could have been maybe like one of the most disastrous rookie seasons in terms of injuries, dealt with like a hamstring injury, a ankle injury, a hip, there was no body part left unmaimed for Marshawn Lloyd by the time he got through this season. But I do want to stress that this is a guy that the Packers took 88th overall, has a bit of a bowling ball type frame, has like a thicker frame that generally speaking, we like at that running back position. And he's a guy that coming out of USC has that draft capital, had an incredibly efficient final season. First 2 years at South Carolina, not so much. Played his final year with Caleb Williams, now in a timeshare role nonetheless, never had more than 116 carries in a year, but averaged 7.1 yards per rush attempt in his final season, 820 rushing yards on just 116 carries. Had a beautiful campaign in terms of efficiency. 41% missed forced tackle rate. That ranked 8th out of 649 qualifying running backs in his final season at USC. I do think historically, when we look at the Green Bay Packers and specifically the Green Bay Packers under Matt LaFleur, like I think Matt LaFleur, generally speaking, wants to get a little bit of a timeshare going if he can. The Josh Jacobs, his carry share, 57.2% of rush attempts in this offense last year. That's just the second highest that he's ever had for a running back in this Matt LaFleur era. Generally speaking, we're going to probably get the lead back around 50% of the rush attempts, probably a little bit lower. There is room for Marshawn Lloyd in this offense. And I think the draft capital, I think the freakish injuries we can write off a little bit, hopefully. But I think there's so much room in what I think is a good offense with a good coach that has a lot of balance. And I don't know, why aren't we buying up Marshawn Lloyd? Because I think like when I'm projecting potential value gainers here in 2025, I can't think of a lot of other players that fit a mold like Marshawn Lloyd does, given potential opportunity.
And it doesn't really cost you anything to go out and get him right now. He's being
RB49.
Yeah, RB49, 154th overall. I mean, Kate, if you're in a smaller bench dynasty league, there's a chance that he's even on your waiver wires because as we got closer to the playoffs, he just wasn't giving you any value. So go check for that. I'm assuming most of you listening to this podcast right now play in much bigger leagues, but I think you can go out and get him pretty cheaply. Now, the only question is, what do you trade for Marshawn Lloyd? Because again, this is a really great draft when it comes to running backs. We could see as many as 18 running backs being drafted inside the top 5 rounds. Would you give up a second round pick for Marshawn Lloyd? Because to me, that's expensive. I think a third rounder is where the values makes sense for me.
I think third round value feels pretty reasonable. And again, just kind of based off of the market we're seeing, that feels, somewhere about right. Marshawn Lloyd, the most recent trade we have on file, Marshawn Lloyd for tight end Eric All in a 4th round pick. Like,
And just to be clear on Eric Hall, we just got a report. I believe it was 2 weeks ago that Eric Hall expected to miss the entire 2025 season. So really, we're probably looking at like just the 4th round pick is the most common trade here.
Yeah, I think 3rd round pick, 4th round pick feels pretty right. Now, the other examples of recent trades, a little bit more convoluted with a lot of other pieces. So I'm not going to get into them. That's like the most straight up value trade that I think we have a good example of. But it feels fair, and I do think that there's a lot of upside. Again, when you look at the system, when you look at the player, his ability to miss forced tackles, his play style, I think could be complementary to Jacobs without necessarily, saying he's going to be the RB1 in this offense. I think he can still hold RB2, RB3 value if things go right, even with Jacobs in the system.
All right, Kate. My sleeper is Dontavian Wicks, who's somebody I've liked for a long time.
Marcus, I'm giving you one more try at Dontavian Wicks.
Here's the thing. I do think there's a chance the Packers go out and try to acquire a receiver this offseason because we heard Josh Jacobs, our guy, talking about how they need a true number one. I just don't know how likely it is that they go out and get a T. Higgins. I don't think Chris Godwin qualifies as a wide receiver one. I don't think Deebo Samuel does that either. So my guess is they're just going to roll with the young guys that they have. But Christian Watson had a significant knee injury at the end of the season. I don't expect him to play at all in the 2025 regular season. Who knows what happened to Jaden Reed? He just completely fell off the map. They still have Romeo Doubs, but I do think Dontavian Wicks is the guy that gets open. He's really good after the catch. He just needs to start catching the ball. It doesn't cost you really anything to go out and get him. And there's chances he's just an every week starter for the Packers. And I think there's a good chance that he leads this team in targets next year.
I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for the Green Bay Packers. And again, we saw this in 2024, even all last offseason, there was conjecture who is, wide receiver one. We think it's Jaden Reed, but maybe there's value in Christian Watson if you can find it. Like, we keep having this conversation because we still don't have a clear answer at who is the number one. We have Dontavian Wicks. He's headed into year 3, which we know can kind of be that magical season for wide receivers. I know we've been spoiled with early breakouts here in the NFL for wide receivers as of late, but like year 3 tends to be a magical season of production. If you're going to hit, we see it a lot in year 3. And Dontavian Wicks, I think a lot of things he's put on tape have been inspiring. He's wide receiver 58 in terms of dynasty startup ADP, which I think is a very reasonable price tag. And as you mentioned, like, there is no clear-cut answer in this offense. My only concern about buying into Dontavian Wicks, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the player. It does. I worry about like Matt LaFleur wanting to prove that he can do this without a wide receiver one. It almost feels like the more the narrative builds about the lack of wide receiver one, it feels like Matt LaFleur wants to prove it to us even harder that like, we don't need a wide receiver one. And
I think he's digging his heels in a little bit here.
Yes. Like that's my only concern is that like, he's like, you know what? I'm going to make the target tree even wider and I'm going to put more branches on that tree just to prove the media wrong that like, yes, he is the smarter head coach. We know he's a smart head coach, but that's my only concern for Dontavian Wicks. Now, like historically, the numbers that he produced as a rookie bode pretty well for the overall trajectory. So let's see. But again, from an opportunity standpoint, there's not really any risk for buying into Dontavian Wicks at his price tag, given what I think we know is the upside in this offense.
And I just don't like this upcoming wide receiver class. So I would rather trade away a late round rookie pick for Dontavian Wicks, who's younger than several of these receivers coming up in this class. We know he's with a good quarterback. He's got the opportunity. Again, I'm not saying to go out and give up a first or second or round pick or anything like that. I still really believe in the talent. I do think this is a good time to buy, considering all of the injuries and the situation going on right now with the Green Bay Packers. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go download the podcast on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow with Matt Williamson.